Before we import more gas or generate more power, we should ask ourselves, can we first take cost-effective measures to reduce our energy use? Those words from former EU Climate and Energy Commissioner Miguel Arias Cañete really hit the nail on the head. They perfectly capture this massive, critical dilemma facing modern energy systems. We're constantly scrambling to meet growing energy demands by just building more supply. But what if the absolute smartest, most lucrative energy resource we have is the energy we simply choose not to use?
Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are completely tearing down the traditional and, honestly, really expensive way we think about energy infrastructure. We're looking at a foundational shift in strategy known as the energy efficiency first principle. So, whether you're an energy planner, a policymaker, or just someone who's super fascinated by how we're going to power the future without totally bankrupting our economies or the planet, well, you are exactly in the right place. We are going to explore how aggressively reducing demand absolutely has to happen before we ever break ground on a new power plant.
So, here is our roadmap for today. 1. The energy efficiency paradigm. 2. Breaking the efficiency myths. 3. Assessing the multiple impacts. 4. Applying efficiency in practice. And finally, number 5, our 5-point action checklist. All right, jumping right in with Section 1, the energy efficiency paradigm, flipping the script on energy generation.
To really wrap your head around this paradigm shift, you need to be introduced to the negawatt. I know, it kind of sounds like a comic book supervillain, but a negawatt is simply a unit of power that represents an amount of energy saved. The totally revolutionary idea here is that we have to start treating this saved energy as a resource that is completely identical to generated power. Because at the end of the day, a kilowatt-hour generated is exactly equivalent to a kilowatt-hour saved. This is the absolute bedrock of the energy efficiency first principle, or EE-once. It basically mandates that we prioritize cost-effective demand-side resources, things like end-use energy efficiency and demand response, over throwing money at shiny new supply-side infrastructure, as long as those demand-side options cost less or deliver more value to society.
The old paradigm? It was completely obsessed with supply-side generation. The answer to everything was just building bigger power plants, laying down thousands of miles of new pipelines, and optimizing these older legacy conventional technologies. The new paradigm flips that entirely. It focuses heavily on demand-side efficiency. We're talking smart grids, deep building retrofits, and harnessing those negawatts to squeeze the absolute maximum utility out of the energy we're already producing.
The catch is, our current electricity markets and grid infrastructures were designed decades ago, specifically to reflect and optimize the cost structures of those conventional technologies. They were literally built to be a one-way street. You generate a massive amount of power at a huge plant, and you push it out to the consumer. Because our whole system has this deep, historical bias toward that supply-heavy model, shifting to an efficiency-first mindset takes really deliberate, rigorous, and, let's be real, sometimes disruptive planning. You're basically fighting the industry's muscle memory to just default to building another power plant.
Moving on to Section 2, Breaking the Efficiency Myths. Why decision-makers often get it wrong.
Look, there are a few really common traps that constantly derail energy planning. First up, assuming efficiency is some kind of magic wand. It's not. It doesn't solve every single energy challenge all on its own. And assuming it does just leads to sloppy system design. Second, planners often completely ignore the massive potential of end-use savings and demand response simply because they're used to picking supply-side solutions out of habit. Third, they evaluate projects based entirely on narrow private costs, totally ignoring the broader societal benefits. And finally, and this one is really painful, governments frequently spend billions upon billions of public dollars importing fossil fuels instead of pumping those same exact funds into local efficiency projects that would dramatically stimulate their own domestic economies. It's a huge, completely avoidable error.
Section 3. Assessing the multiple impacts, the societal math and KPIs of efficiency.
So, when planners are trying to decide between, say, building a new gas turbine versus funding a massive citywide building insulation program, they use a cost-benefit analysis, or a multi-criteria analysis. The absolutely crucial thing here is that these analyses have to be evaluated from a societal perspective, not just a super narrow energy system cost perspective. In fact, European Union legal frameworks actually mandate that planners look at wider sustainable development goals. If you're only looking at the upfront capital cost of the insulation versus the turbine, you're missing the entire economic picture.
Okay, look at this number, 30.
According to some incredibly rigorous socio-environmental assessments from the EnerFirst project, applying deep energy retrofits across existing building stocks can drop the share of poorly heated floor space, meaning spaces that fall below 18 degrees Celsius, by over 30 percentage points. Think about the massive societal value locked inside that single metric for a second.
When you achieve a 30% reduction in freezing, poorly heated homes, you unlock what we call multiple impacts, or MIs. See, efficiency doesn't just save megawatt hours on a spreadsheet. It drastically reduces greenhouse gas emissions. It significantly lowers air pollution, which in turn slashes public healthcare costs. And it drastically improves indoor comfort, directly boosting people's health, their well-being, and even workforce productivity. When you actually factor these multiple impacts into your cost-benefit analysis, the economic argument for efficiency absolutely crushes the argument for building new conventional power plants.
Section 4. Applying efficiency in practice. The decision tree framework.
So how do we actually do this? Well, researchers have put together this fantastic, flexible decision tree framework to truly operationalize the efficiency first principle. It gives planners and policymakers a highly structured way to map out their operations, their checks, and their data inputs. It literally forces decision-makers to stop and ask at every single junction, wait, have we rigorously assessed the demand-side options before we approve this massive supply-side investment? By mapping out the sequence of decisions like this, it makes sure energy efficiency isn't just an afterthought, but the very first checkpoint in all infrastructure planning.
And this framework, it builds across the entire life cycle of a project. Whether we're talking about a high-level policymaking case or a ground-level utility system planning case, they all share similar project phases. During the inception and preparation phases, regulators have to define the cost-benefit framework to make sure it includes all those societal multiple impacts we just talked about. Then, in the validation phase, the proposed plan gets thoroughly checked to guarantee that demand-side resources were given fair priority. Finally, during implementation, you don't just walk away. The market has to be monitored to ensure those efficient technologies are actually being adopted. It embeds efficiency straight into the DNA of the project management.
All right, bringing it home with Section 5, our 5-point action checklist, a pragmatic playbook for EE1.
If you want to actually successfully implement the energy efficiency first principle, you've got to check these 5 boxes. Number 1, policy integration. Energy efficiency has to be the foundational consideration in literally all regional and national energy plans. 2, investment decisions. You must strictly prioritize funding for efficiency over new supply if the outcomes are more cost-effective. 3, regulatory measures. Governments have to step up and enact strict building codes, transport efficiency standards, and industrial regulations. 4, economic incentives. You've got to provide the financial support mechanisms that make these efficiency upgrades a no-brainer for private markets. And 5, stakeholder engagement. You have to actively educate and involve consumers, utilities, and local governments so that everybody understands the sheer value of a megawatt.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly critical question to ask ourselves and the organizations we work with. Can you find cost-effective measures to reduce your energy demand before approving your next supply investment? The math is incredibly clear, the societal benefits are absolutely immense, and the framework to actually pull it off is right here in front of us. Efficiency shouldn't be an alternative. It has to be our first resort. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Now, take this playbook and go find those negawatts.